Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Wellness Connection. My name is Fiona Kane and I'm glad to have you back here today. I am talking about a few things today. I'm talking about diets, talking about diet culture, and I'm talking about can you have health at every size? These topics are a little bit fraught with danger, so I will do my best to be really careful with my words. My intention here is not to offend anyone, not to dismiss anyone's feelings or thoughts. However, it is to, I suppose, just talk about mostly about science, but some things around ethics and other things as well. And just to give my opinion on these things, you certainly don't have to agree with me. However, I like to think that sometimes more than one thing can be true at the same time, and I try and be fairly balanced with the way I discuss this. But anyway, so first, I've been a nutritionist for 16 years now. And in that time, lots of fads have come and gone, and lots of things have come and gone. And I know my weight throughout my life, and certainly throughout my career, it's gone up and down all over the place. I've had my own weight issues, and I've had used different dietary protocols. I certainly know that the paleo style diet worked really, really well for me when I was younger, and it really helped with putting my autoimmune diseases into remission and helping me with weight at that time. So I know that certain diets can work really well for certain people at certain times. But anyway, so I'll start by talking. First of all, I'll talk about our culture of seeing diets really in a religious, fanatical kind of way. Uh, Again, if you, I'm talking about science. So if you have a certain diet based on your religion, I absolutely respect that. I'll leave that to you. That's not for me to comment on. I'm talking about science. I'm talking about nutrition, and I'm talking from that point of view. Religion, that's a whole other kettle of fish. That's not my bag. It's not my expertise. But what I do find is people do get caught up in diets and they treat them like a religion, and that can be a real problem. So people will believe in, the paleo diet or the carnivore diet, or they'll believe in the vegan diet or whatever the diet is. And I'm not saying that they don't have their place. All sorts of diets have their place. And as I was just saying, I know that I got benefit from doing a paleo style diet. And generally, I do better when I stick with those general ideas, right? I certainly know there are people who use a carnivore diet. And it really helps treat their autoimmunity, right? Michaela Peterson is one of those people, and there's many other people who do that. Now, am I recommending that everyone only eat red meat and nothing else? No. However, I am open enough to acknowledge that different things work for different people. And I think sometimes in the nutrition community, we get very haughty and very kind of dismissive of things. Oh, that's no. I don't believe that. I believe lots of different things work. And that works for her at the moment. That works for some people. Whether or not it will work for them long time, I don't know. Certainly, if you're doing a restrictive diet, you should get regular checkups and regular blood tests just to make sure you're getting the nutrients that you need. But what I find though is people do get religious about these things, and they get religious about them beyond the time that they work. So, for example, and I see this a lot with vegan diets. What will happen is, look, when we go onto a diet or start a new dietary style, often we are looking for something to improve our health. We might have a health issue, and maybe we have been eating fairly poorly. Maybe we've been eating lots of junk food, and it's more or less how it works a lot of the time. Not every time, but a lot of the time. So when we do start the new dietary protocol, whatever it is, if it's kind of like for want of a better term, clean eating protocol where you're eating real food, most people respond really well to that, and most people feel better. And you feel better for two reasons. One, you feel better because you've got rid of all the crap out of your diet. Of course, you're going to feel better. You might feel bad initially, but after a few days or a few weeks of kind of detoxing all the junk, you'll feel better. And you also often feel better because you just feel better about yourself, because we have all these kind of shame issues about discipline and self-control and all that sort of stuff. So if you're sort of doing a diet and you're doing it well, then you generally will feel good about yourself that you're doing that thing. But so we feel better. And what happens though, particularly in vegan diets, I'm not saying it can't happen in other diets, but particularly in vegan diets, is over time that wears off. And what part of the reason it wears off, of course, is because we have a certain level of nutrients in our bodies. So you've got a certain um, storage of things like iron or vitamin A or vitamin D or B vitamins or whatever it is, and you've got all of those stored, or a lot of those stored in your body, certain levels. Depending on what your levels are before you start a restrictive diet protocol, will also depend on how long before you might start to see signs and symptoms of deficiency. So, if you've got really good levels of all of those things, you might be on a vegan diet for 2 or 3 years before you start having any problems at all. And other people might be within 6 months, right? Because they don't have as much in store. So within 6 months, they start becoming deficient. The other thing is too, there are genetic different genes, so different gene coding in different people's bodies that makes them able to use certain nutrients or not. So, for example, vitamin A, so vitamin A is something that is a really common thing that people are deficient in vegan diets in particular. And people say, well, how is that so? Because there's all these carrots and all these yellow things and orange things and all the things that have got what is called carotenoids in there, which is kind of like I think of the words provitamin A, but they're not vitamin A yet. They've got to be converted into vitamin A. Now, vitamin A itself is only available in animal food. So you cannot get it from a vegan diet. It is not possible, does not exist in a vegan diet. Now, if you are a person who is able to turn that vitamin A, provitamin A, into vitamin A, if your body does that really, really well, if genetically you are able to do that really, really well, then you're the sort of person that might be able to thrive on a vegan diet, or at least for a certain period of time. If you don't genetically, if you don't can't genetically do that, you are not going to thrive on a vegan diet. You're going to get very sick on a vegan diet, right? So it's not just about like willpower, or are you doing the diet right? It's also, is your body made for that diet? Uh, and so what happens is, I see that people start to have health problems, but when they start to have health problems, it's not because of the diet, because the diet's great. And when I first did the diet, I felt great. Therefore, it's still the right diet. And that's what I'm talking about, like the religion side of things, as far as being religious about diet, is it's science, right? And we have to just acknowledge our own body and what our own needs are. And we have to look at diets from a point of view of what works for us. So if your paleo diet is not working for you anymore, or if your vegan diet is not working for you anymore, or whatever the protocol is, then we need to look at what do we need to do about that? Do we need to do supplementation? Do we need to change the diet? What do you need to do to alter this to make it better? Because what often happens is, and again, I see this with vegan diets, is people, their body just starts to fall apart. And then they come to me and they want me to give them a vegan solution to a vegan problem. Unfortunately, the problem is caused by the vegan diet. And their digestive system starts to break down and fall apart. And they just get sicker and sicker and sicker, and their bones start to fall apart. And they really get so sick, and their immune system and all the rest of it. And then they want me to give them a vegan solution. Well, what's the vegan solution to this? There is no vegan solution to it, because it's the vegan diet that's causing the problem for that person. Maybe not someone else, but for that person, it is. So what I ask people to do is, while you can like certain protocols, or like certain diets and trial certain things, and I'll certainly trial certain things with my clients, you have to go on the evidence. You have to go on what works for you, and you have to adjust it accordingly. So you might do a partially vegan or partially paleo, or whatever it is that you really feel attracted to and want to do, but you might not do it in a full capacity, because the full capacity might make you really sick. So I'm not telling anyone to eat necessarily that you have to eat any particular diet. You do what you want to do, but ultimately use evidence of your results. Use evidence of your blood tests. Use evidence of how you feel to guide you as to whether or not that dietary protocol is still the right dietary protocol for you. And even something that did work for you in the past, it doesn't mean it will work now, particularly for women, because what would work in someone who is a young woman going through teenage years and starting to get a cycle, as to what would work for someone who's 35 or someone who's having a baby or someone who's breastfeeding. And again, looking at a woman once she starts to go into perimenopause and menopause, they are very different stages of your life. And I can assure you that what worked in that stage is not always going to work in this stage. Even things like intermittent fasting, and this can be a whole episode on its own, but intermittent fasting can have its place. It can be really useful. If you've got a history of eating disorders, not a good idea. But if you are able to do it in a really sort of conscious and comfortable way that works for you, great. However, what that looks like is different for different people, and it can be really successful in men and not always be as successful in women because of our hormonal changes. What's going on? So for us, it can actually cause us to have high stress hormones and cause us issues if we do it in a way that does not work for us. So I'm not against intermittent fasting. I think it has its place and it can be really great for men and women. However, it depends on you. Depends on your situation. It depends on your body, your stage in life. So please do not get attached to diets in a religious manner. Just learn about different diets, do what feels right for you, but then work with the evidence and work with a professional like me to get really specific advice if you need to play around and kind of figure out what's right for you. So just don't get kind of religiously attached to a certain type of diet. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink. So that's kind of in regards to getting attached to the diet. So what is the perfect diet? The perfect diet is the one that works for you at that time. That's what the perfect diet is. There's no such thing as a perfect diet. The only other thing I would add to it would be the more you eat just real foods. So rather than having to know about ingredients and read food labels, you actually eat the ingredients. So you're eating the meat, the fish, the vegetables, the fruit, the nuts, the seeds, the olive oil. I think I said eggs if I didn't say eggs. The avocado, that kind of thing. If you're eating the actual food rather than the actual, looking at a package that's got 35 ingredients in it. Generally speaking, eating real food is the best diet. Often eating in an ancestral way. So, depending on where you live, if it's cold weather, if it's hot weather, there's a whole bunch of reasons why different diets work for people with different nationalities or who live in different areas or areas with different kind of temperatures. So, there's not a perfect diet, but eating real food, eating kind of generally local food tends to be a really good idea, and it might ancestrally might be really useful as well. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, depending on if you've moved to a completely different place. So if your ancestral diet was kind of like something that they were doing in Scotland, which is kind of my ancestral diet, but now I live in Australia, doesn't always translate to here and now, what they were doing there as to what maybe I should be doing now. So the other topic that I wanted to cover today, and I do have a bit of time left, so I will do that, is I wanted to talk a little bit about the health at every size movement. Now, I get the idea behind the movement, and I agree with lots of aspects of it. But what I would say is that health is okay. We can be really healthy at many sizes. We can also be unhealthy at many sizes. You can be quite underweight and very unhealthy because you are underweight, or you can be quite overweight and unhealthy because you're overweight. There are also slim people who are well and overweight people who are well. So it's not kind of one thing. But you cannot have health at every size. Not every size is healthy. That's on the lower end and on the higher end. Not every size is healthy. The other thing to know is that metabolic disease, so kind of like the insulin resistance, diabetes, those kinds of diseases, a lot of the time people, like I think historically we've said that being overweight causes those disease. I actually think we're understanding more now. It's the other way around, that those diseases cause the overweight for some people. However, I think it's now I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but I think maybe kind of 40% of people, and I haven't got that number exactly right, but a fair number of people who have what we would class as a healthy weight would be sort of classed as a healthy size. They have metabolic disease. So a lot of people have and things like fatty liver as well. So a lot of people have fatty liver, insulin resistance, those kind of issues, and be what we would call a healthy weight. There is also a whole bunch of people that we would class as being an unhealthy weight who don't have metabolic disease. So it's not as simple as metabolic disease only happens to people who are overweight and it's because they're overweight. It's not as simple as that. Metabolic disease happens in people of all sizes, and being overweight, I think for some people is the result of that metabolic disease. It doesn't happen like that for everybody, but it does happen for some people. Now, what has happened though in sort of more recent times is we've got this whole kind of social justice thing where we're almost celebrating people becoming morbidly obese. That is not okay. So, celebrating who you are, absolutely. And being comfortable in your skin, absolutely. The relationship you have with your body is the longest one you're going to have in your whole life. Longest relationship. It is good to get comfortable with it. It is good to get to know it. It is good to be comfortable in your skin. So I am all for being comfortable in your skin. I am all for loving yourself, or at the very least respecting yourself and respecting your body, and and working with what you got, because we're all shapes and sizes, and that's wonderful. It's great. We do come in all flavors and shapes and sizes and all the rest of it, and that can be, that's a really great thing that we're all quite different. And so the variation in all of that for healthy is huge, right? So there's lots of very healthy people at all different sizes. So I've got no problem with that. And I also don't want to demonize people who are extremely underweight or extremely overweight. So it's not about demonizing those people or having judgment on those people or anything like that at all. However, glorifying it is not a good idea. And encouraging it. There are sort of websites. There's people who overeat on, I think it's YouTube or something. I don't know. Maybe it's OnlyFans. I don't know. But they overeat to the audience, and they're really actually killing themselves from overeating, um, for likes on I don't know, whatever the platform is. And I think there's other side of it too. There's certainly people with other kind of the eating disorders on the other end of the scale who are kind of online parading that and kind of cheering each other on for being emaciated. So I think that there is, on again both ends of the scale, whether it's under or over, there are ends of the scale that are unhealthy. And while we shouldn't judge or be cruel to people in those places, I also think that they need help, and they don't get help if we glorify it somehow, or we pay them to overeat and kill themselves, which is kind of what's happening on some online spaces. It's really messed up. Um, so I think that it is okay to be lots of different sizes, and it's okay to be who you are. And I think that what it comes down to is, if your weight is affecting your health or is connected to your health issue, ultimately you need to address the underlying issue. Does everyone need to be a size 8 or a size 10 or whatever the magic size is? No, definitely not. I think, though, that we do have to look at reality, and we do have to look at our results, and we need to understand when we do need to make a change, and when we maybe don't. And there are lots of people, like I said, lots of different sizes who are perfectly healthy. And not everyone who is not a size 8 or a size 10 needs to go on a diet, needs to lose weight, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely not. So it's not a matter of everyone has to look like this sort of model. And so in that way, I understand that now we've got, there's models of different sizes and different shapes, and there are, I understand more of that's coming along, and to a certain degree, like, I embrace that, and I sort of think, no, it is good to have that. Lots of people being represented, lots of us being represented, right? So that is a good thing. What is not a good thing is when we lie to ourselves about if the way we're eating or if our weight is affecting our health. If that is affecting your health, then whether it's under or over, we need to do something about it. So don't glorify people who are killing themselves slowly, one meal or one lack of at a time, but do celebrate differences and a range of sizes and people, and health isn't necessarily something you can identify by looking at someone and looking at their weight. So don't judge people on whether or not you think they're healthy or not healthy. What it comes down to, though, is as individuals, we need to identify when we need to do something about it and when we don't need to do something about it, and what we feel comfortable with, what we don't feel comfortable with. But we have to deal with reality. So you can have as many kind of social justice movements as you like, but the problem with a lot of social justice movements is they want to just ignore reality or rewrite reality. So is what you're doing affecting your health? Then maybe we need to do something about it. Or you probably do need to do something about it. Is it not affecting your health? Okay, great. That too. You don't need to do anything about it. And it's the same with a lot of, sometimes people I've had in the past, like I've had people come to me and they want to bring their kind of 85-year-old father and say he needs to change his diet. And I say, does he? I say, yes, yes, yes. He's got a terrible diet, blah, blah, blah. He's 85. Good on him. He made it that far and he's happy. Like, why does he need to change his diet, right? So we kind of do sometimes get caught up on what we think is right and what we think people should do, or we think that everyone should do a certain thing or everyone should be a certain way. And 85, good on you. You don't need to. And the other thing is that we always have that example of, well, what do I need to change my diet for? Because like I know someone who's 85 or 105 and they smoke and they drink and they do all the things. It's absolutely true. There is a subset of people who can do whatever they like and they'll live to 100. And they do whatever they like. Actually, the people who make it to that age more often than not are actually people who do smoke and drink and all the things, right? So is that an advertisement to say that we should do all those things? Well, it depends on who you are, right? And we don't always know, but you might have a fair idea by this stage. Is I always I compare it to the example I use is the Rolling Stones, but the problem is so many people are young these days, they won't know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to look it up. But essentially, there are two people in the Rolling Stones I refer to for this. I refer to Brian Jones and I refer to Keith Richards. So Brian Jones was the guitarist of the Rolling Stones, and he was founding member and all that sort of stuff. Not just guitarist, a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway, don't obsessives don't get angry at me for not describing him well enough. But anyway, a very very talented musician, and he died. I think he was 26. He was part of what we call a 26 club or 27 club with young musicians. I've stood over his grave in England, and I can't remember, either 26 or 27. 27 club, I think it was. And he was he he kind of had like asthma and breathing problems, and he was just one of those. Generally, he didn't look healthy, he didn't look well, he had a very frail, it was very frail, right? That was just who he was. He wasn't very robust. So he did not survive the rock and roll lifestyle and the drugs and alcohol and all the things, right? He did not survive that. Whereas Keith Richards in the same band, he has done it all. And he is robust. I mean, he literally had, when he was a baby, they were, these guys were all born around the time of the bombing raids in World War II in London. That's how old they are. And on a side note, I was born in a crossfire hurricane from Jumping Jack Flash. That's actually what I was referring to. Mick Jagger was born during a bombing raid in a hospital in London. Anyway, I'll get distracted talking about Rolling Stones. But what happens is a lot of the children, or most of the children, were evacuated from London and they were sent to the country to live, and that included Keith Richards when he was a small baby, and I think within hours of him being evacuated, a bomb actually landed on his cot. Right, it was called a doodle bug. That's the name of the bomb, and he can survive everything. He can survive anything. So he's robust. And so some of us are robust. We've got great genes and we can do whatever we want and we can get away with it. And some of us are not that robust and we actually can't push the parameters too much because when we do, we get sick and it doesn't work for us. Is that fair? No. But is that reality? Yes. I'm one of the people who doesn't get away with much. That's why I had all those health problems when I was in my teens and when I was in my 20s, and why I still had to have challenges now and I still have to work on my health now. I've had to actively work on my health most of my life, and many people do. Other people don't have to ever think about it. And they, make it to 105 with a cigarette and whiskey, one in each hand, good on them. So, it's not as black and white as these are the rules. This is what everyone should do, and everyone should eat like this, and this is the perfect diet. And if we all did this, we'd all be fine. We actually all have to work with the circumstances that we've been dealt with the genes we've been dealt with the situation we've been dealt with, and we need to work with that. And if we get hard line about it, if we get obsessive about it, treat it like a religion rather than a science, if we get all kind of political about it and we turn it into a social justice thing, but don't actually think about the actual facts and our health and what we really do or don't need to do, then we have an issue. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is listen to your body. Do what it is that you need to do. What works for you might not be what works for somebody else. If you have to work a bit harder to maintain your health, then you do. And it might be unfortunate, but it's true. Nothing you can do about that except just get on with it. And, as far as different dietary protocols and things go, try different things and see what works for you, but be open to the fact that you might need to change it, or what works now won't be what works next year. And just be open to just testing and measuring what works for you. Work on evidence, work on results, see what your blood tests say, all of that kind of stuff, and work with someone like me to help you if you need some support to figure that out. But yeah, just I think that we get a bit carried away with a belief around food and belief around diets. And I think we need to back off a lot of the belief and just work with what do I need? What works for me? What is giving me the results that I need? And I think if we just keep it down to those basic things, we would all do a whole lot better rather than getting really excitable about being on this side or that side or this opinion or that opinion. Anyway, I will leave it there. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but yeah, just eat real food and be open to what works for you. And I think if you do that, you'll be doing well. And if you need help, you can come and see me. Anyway, I will talk to you again next time. Thank you. See ya.